Welcome to this explainer. Let's just jump right into it. I want you to imagine standing in front of enormous stone walls. Walls so vast and so incredibly heavy that later generations genuinely believed only mythical giants could have stacked them. Today we're exploring a forgotten Bronze Age civilization hidden right among the rugged hills of southern Greece. These people laid the very foundations of ancient Greek culture, centuries before the philosophers of Athens or the expansion of the Roman Empire even existed. They were master builders, fiercely ambitious rulers, and they built a staggering network of power before suddenly, and quite mysteriously, collapsing around 1200 BC. Okay, let's dive into this. For centuries, people have read Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and wondered, are these just fairy tales? Like, who really inspired the legends of Troy? Well, the answer lies in the Mycenaeans. These weren't just characters in a story. They were real, heavily armed warriors who commanded formidable armies and established this incredible maritime trading network that stretched straight across the Mediterranean world. By looking at the evidence they left behind, we can finally separate the myth from reality.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, Greece before the Mycenaeans. Second, the rise of the citadels. Third, a fierce warrior society. And fourth, unearthing the royal tombs.
Section 1. Greece before the Mycenaeans. To truly grasp their achievements, we have to travel back more than 3,500 years. The landscape of ancient Greece was this fractured land of isolated valleys and thousands of scattered islands, which created a stark contrast in the region. Across the sea, on the island of Crete, you had the Minoans. They were this remarkably advanced, peaceful civilization who dominated maritime trade with elegant, unfortified palaces and these beautiful, colorful frescoes. But over on the mainland, life was demanding. The majority of people lived in villages, and most families depended entirely on harsh farming. Men worked the land, growing wheat, barley, olives, and grapes, while women managed households and spun wool to produce textiles. And those textiles actually became one of the kingdom's most valuable exports. Through pure resourcefulness and cooperation, these mainland farming communities gradually accumulated wealth and laid the groundwork for an absolute powerhouse of a civilization. Section 2. Rise of the Citadels. Right around 1600 BC, those ambitious mainland rulers began to consolidate their wealth. They started building entirely new kinds of strongholds in the Peloponnese. Now, unlike the open, peaceful palaces of the Minoans, these new cities were explicitly designed for war. The Mycenaeans were, quite frankly, accomplished engineers. Their architecture combined practicality with an absolutely massive scale, protecting their cities with what we call Cyclopean Walls. These were enormous defensive barriers made of massive limestone blocks. The engineering here was so extraordinary, and the stone so impossibly heavy that later Greeks who discovered the ruins thought humans just couldn't have built them. They literally spawned enduring Greek myths that giants called Cyclopes must have constructed them. Behind those giant walls, the economy didn't look anything like our modern world. There were no private businesses. It revolved entirely around the royal palace. At the head of that palace was the Wanax, a king who held absolute authority over both political and religious affairs. The Wanax, supported by his officials, efficiently controlled the large storerooms of grain, olive oil, wool, and metals. They left absolutely nothing to chance. They carefully recorded every tax, trade deal, and military supply using a mysterious script called Linear B. For centuries, this writing was a total mystery. Many thought it was a completely unknown language. But then, in 1952, a British cryptographer named Michael Ventris cracked the code. To the absolute surprise of historians, the tablets recorded an early form of the Greek language, providing a fascinating glimpse into the daily workings of one of Europe's earliest bureaucratic societies. But here is an absolutely crucial distinction to make. The Mycenaeans did not form a single monolithic empire ruled by one supreme monarch. It wasn't like Rome. Instead, they were a network of fiercely independent city-states, places you've probably heard of like Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, Thebes, and Athens. While they frequently competed with one another for resources and power, they were unified by a shared early Greek language, a shared culture, and shared religious traditions. Section 3. A fierce warrior society. So if the Minoans were defined by peaceful trade, the Mycenaean elite were geared entirely toward military strength and conquest. Their arsenals were fully stocked with beautifully worked bronze swords, bronze spears, massive defensive shields, and their highly distinctive boar's tusk helmets. What you really should take away from this is that these weapons weren't just practical tools for the battlefield. They were the ultimate symbols of extreme wealth, honor, and political prestige in their society. This warrior ethos just permeated everything. Young noblemen were trained from early childhood in the arts of war, and this rigorous discipline created the absolute most effective fighting force of the Late Bronze Age. Kings frequently organized massive maritime campaigns across the Aegean Sea, projecting their power far beyond mainland Greece. And it was exactly this martial culture, this intense emphasis on courage, loyalty, and honor in battle, that inspired the heroic legends recorded centuries later.
Section 4. Unearthing the royal tombs.
For a really long time, historians weren't sure if the Mycenaeans were entirely mythical. Think about the timeline here. From their rise in 1600 BC to their mysterious collapse around 1200 BC, hundreds of years passed in a total dark age. It wasn't until the 8th century BC that Homer finally recorded the oral traditions into the epic legends we know today. For millennia, they lived only in stories. That is until the 19th century AD, when an obsessive German archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann set out to prove Homer's epics were real history. He began to literally dig up the truth.
When Schliemann excavated the royal burial grounds, he didn't just find bones. He found an astonishing volume of treasure. We're talking gold cups, jeweled weapons, intricately crafted jewelry, and ornate bronze armor. And where did all this come from? Well, their massive trade network brought in gold from Egypt, ivory from Africa, and precious stones from the Near East. It revealed immense, staggering wealth, proving this society deeply honored its powerful leaders and truly believed that earthly prestige and riches should be carried directly into the afterlife.
And among these treasures was one of the most famous archaeological finds in human history. Schliemann pulled the striking golden mask from the dirt and proudly declared he had looked upon the face of Agamemnon, the mythical king who led the Greeks against Troy. But there's an incredible irony here. As modern research proves, the mask actually predates the legendary king Agamemnon by several centuries. Actually, scratch that, Schliemann's timeline was completely off. But even so, the artifact perfectly symbolizes the immense wealth and power of these real forgotten warriors.
So the absolutely crucial point is this. The Mycenaeans grew from rugged farming communities into a true international superpower. They connected Europe, Asia, and Africa through a vast maritime network. They exported finely crafted pottery, olive oil, wine, and textiles, while importing copper from Cyprus, tin, and Egyptian gold. And trade wasn't just economics, it was strategic diplomacy. By exchanging luxury gifts between kings, they strengthened alliances. Through this brilliant combination of economic trade, diplomatic relations, and unmatched military expansion, they completely shaped the course of European history.
But that brings us to the ultimate mystery. With such immense wealth, giant fortified walls, and a trade network spanning the known world, what on earth caused their sudden, mysterious, and total collapse around 1200 BC? How does a society this organized, a bureaucratic machine like this, simply vanish? It is a fascinating historical cliffhanger, and it really leaves us questioning just how fragile even the greatest civilizations can be. Thank you so much for joining this explainer, and keep questioning the history beneath our feet.